The rain drummed steadily against the windows of Ruby's diner, turning the afternoon streets into rivers of gray. Caroline Mitchell wiped down the counter for the third time that hour, her movements automatic after 15 years of the same routine. At 56, she knew every crack in the red vinyl booths, every squeak in the checkered floor. Her blonde hair, once vibrant, now faded to a softer shade, was pulled back neatly under her work cap. The red skirt and light blue uniform shirt had been her second skin for so long she barely noticed them anymore. It was 3 o'clock on a Wednesday. The lunch rush had passed, leaving only a handful of regulars scattered throughout the diner. Caroline preferred these quiet hours. They gave her time to think, to breathe, to remember why she was still here after all these years. The bell above the door chimed, and an elderly man shuffled in from the rain. He looked to be in his 70s, maybe older. His gray hair was damp and uncombed, and his brown jacket had seen better days. One shoulder seam was coming loose, and the elbows were worn thin. He carried himself with a slight stoop, the kind that comes from years of hard work or heavy burdens. His face was weathered but kind, with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and sorrow. Caroline watched him make his way to the corner booth, the one by the window where he could watch the rain. She'd seen him before, she realized. He'd come in a few times over the past weeks, always alone, always quiet, always ordering just coffee. She gave him a moment to settle before approaching with the coffee pot. "Good afternoon," she said warmly, her voice carrying the gentle cadence of someone who'd spent decades making strangers feel welcome. "Looks like you got caught in the weather." "It came up quick," he said, his voice soft and a bit rough around the edges. "I don't mind it, though. Rain makes the world feel quieter somehow." Caroline smiled, pouring his coffee. "I know what you mean. My late husband used to say that rain was the earth taking a deep breath. I always liked that." The man looked up at her, and she saw recognition in his eyes, not of her specifically, but of shared experience. The look of someone who'd also lost and learned to keep going. "That's poetry," he said. "Your husband was a wise man." "He was," Caroline agreed. "Gone 8 years now, but I still hear his voice sometimes, especially on rainy days." She set the coffee pot down. "Can I get you something to eat? We have fresh apple pie today." "Made it myself this morning." The man hesitated, and in that pause, Caroline saw something she recognized too well. Pride wrestling with need. "Just the coffee today," he said, managing a smile. "Thank you, though." Caroline nodded and moved away, but she kept an eye on the corner booth. She'd been a waitress long enough to read people, to see the stories they didn't tell. The worn jacket, the careful way he rationed the sugar packets, the fact that he made 1 cup of coffee last an hour, these were the signs of someone stretching every dollar as far as it would go. She knew that struggle. After Robert died, the medical bills had taken everything. The house, the savings, the comfortable retirement they'd planned. She'd gone back to waitressing, a job she'd left 30 years earlier when they'd married. Starting over at 48 had been humbling, but it had also taught her something valuable about resilience and about recognizing it in others. At 4 o'clock, the man carefully counted out exact change for his coffee, leaving it on the table. Caroline walked over as he stood to leave. "Hold on just a moment," she said gently. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a few bills from her own tip money. "Sir, you left this on the floor by your booth. Must have fallen out of your pocket." He looked at the money, then at her, and understanding passed between them. His eyes grew bright with emotion he was trying hard to contain. "I don't think that's mine," he said quietly. "I'm quite certain it is," Caroline said firmly but kindly. "These old floors, things slip right out of pockets all the time. Happens every day." For a long moment he simply looked at her, and she saw his jaw work as he fought to maintain his composure. "Thank you," he finally said, his voice thick. "You're very kind. We all need a little help sometimes. Caroline said. "There's no shame in it. And when things get better, you'll help someone else. That's how it works." He nodded, unable to speak, and carefully folded the bills into his pocket. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door. "Your husband was right about the rain, and he was a lucky man to have you." Then he was gone, disappearing into the wet afternoon. Caroline went back to her routine, wiping tables, refilling salt shakers, chatting with the regulars who filtered in for early dinner. She didn't think much more about the encounter. It wasn't the first time she'd quietly paid for a customer's meal, and it wouldn't be the last. Her daughter Emma, a teacher in Philadelphia, sometimes scolded her for giving away her tip money. "Mom, you need every dollar, too," she'd say. But Caroline couldn't help it. Robert had been the same way, always helping, always generous, even when they couldn't quite afford it. "It comes back around," he used to say. "Maybe not in money, but in ways that matter more." 2 weeks passed. The elderly man didn't return, and Caroline assumed he'd moved on, perhaps found help elsewhere, perhaps left town. She hoped he was okay, wherever he was. Then, on a gray Monday morning, a man in an expensive suit walked into Ruby's diner. He looked out of place among the truckers and construction workers having their breakfast. He approached the counter where Caroline was pouring coffee for a regular. "Excuse me?" he said politely. "Are you Caroline Mitchell?" Caroline felt a flutter of worry. Official-looking people asking for her by name was rarely good news. "Yes, that's me. Is something wrong?" "Not at all," the man said, smiling. "My name is Richard Porter. I'm an attorney. I've been asked to find you by a client. May we speak privately for a moment?" Caroline's mind raced through possibilities, none of them good, but she nodded and led him to an empty booth. "Ms. Mitchell," Richard began, opening his briefcase. "Do you remember speaking with an elderly gentleman about 2 weeks ago? He sat in that corner booth, and you helped him with some money he'd dropped?" Caroline's cheeks flushed. Yes. Is he all right? Did I do something wrong?" "On the contrary," Richard said, and his smile widened. "The man you helped is William Ashford. Perhaps you've heard of him?" The name meant nothing to Caroline, and her confusion must have shown on her face. "Mr. Ashford," Richard continued, "is the founder of Ashford Industries. He's one of the wealthiest men in the state, worth about $3 billion, give or take." Caroline felt the world tilt slightly. "But he looked exactly as he wanted to look," Richard said gently. "Mr. Ashford lost his wife 2 years ago. They'd been married for 53 years. He's been struggling with the loss. He told me he'd started walking the city, trying to feel connected to ordinary life again, trying to remember what mattered. He'd dress simply, go to different places, just to be around people without the weight of who he was." Caroline's hand went to her chest. "The money I gave him was the first genuine kindness he'd experienced in months," Richard said. "Everyone else either fawned over him because of his wealth or tried to get something from him. But you saw a person who needed help and you helped. No agenda, no expectation of return. You gave from your own pocket, your own tips, which he later learned were probably money you needed yourself." Tears welled in Caroline's eyes. He reminded me of my Robert, of how we all need each other sometimes." "Mr. Ashford would like to meet with you," Richard said. "Would you be willing?" An hour later, Caroline found herself in a tastefully appointed office in one of the downtown buildings she passed every day, but had never entered. William Ashford stood as she came in, and she recognized him immediately, cleaned up, wearing a proper suit, but still the same kind eyes, the same gentle demeanor. "Caroline," he said, coming around the desk. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Ashford," she began, but he raised his hand. "Please call me William, the formality. I've had enough of that to last a lifetime." He gestured to a comfortable chair. "Sit, please. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?" Caroline sat, feeling surreal. I'm fine, thank you. Mr. William, I don't understand, the lawyer said. That I'm wealthy, yes, William said, settling into the chair across from her. But that day in the diner I wasn't. Not in any way that mattered. I was just a lonely old man, lost in grief, wondering if anyone in the world still saw people as people. And you did. He leaned forward, his eyes intent. Do you know what it's like to be invisible in plain sight? To have people respond to your bank account instead of your humanity? After Helen died, I realized I was surrounded by people but completely alone. Everyone wanted something. Advice, donations, investments, introductions. No one just wanted to share a cup of coffee and talk about the rain. Caroline nodded slowly. After Robert died, I felt invisible too, but in a different way. Like I'd become just part of the background of life. A waitress people looked through, not at. But that's not true, William said softly. You see everyone. I watched you that day. The way you talked to every customer, remembered their names, asked about their lives. You made that diner feel like home. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. I've been thinking about what to do with my money, he said. I have no children. Helen and I weren't blessed that way. I've established trusts for various charities, but I wanted something more personal. Something that honored people like you. People who give quietly, who help without expectation, who make the world gentler. He turned back to her. I'm establishing the Helen Ashford Foundation for Everyday Kindness. It will provide grants to ordinary people who've demonstrated extraordinary compassion. People who've given from their own need to help others. People who see humanity where others look away. Caroline felt tears streaming down her face. That's beautiful, William. Helen would be proud. You're going to run it, he said simply. What? Caroline's voice was barely a whisper. I want you to be the foundation's director, William continued. You'll identify the recipients, tell their stories, distribute the grants. You understand this world, the world of people just trying to get by, trying to help each other through the hard days. I'm offering you a salary of $120,000 a year, full benefits, and the resources to make a real difference. The room spun. Caroline gripped the arms of her chair. But I'm just a waitress. I don't have a college degree. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You have something more valuable, William said, kneeling beside her chair. You have wisdom, empathy, the ability to see people. And you have lived experience of both need and generosity. That's worth more than any degree. He took her hand gently. That day you gave me back my faith in humanity. You showed me that kindness still exists without calculation. Let me give you the chance to do that for others. Please. Caroline looked into his kind, weathered face and saw her Robert, saw every person she'd ever helped, saw all the customers who'd become friends over endless cups of coffee. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll do it. 6 months later, Caroline stood in a community center, watching as the foundation presented its first round of grants. A teacher who'd been buying school supplies for her students with her own money. A mechanic who'd been fixing cars for free for single mothers. A teenager who'd been tutoring younger kids in his housing project. William stood beside her, healthy and engaged with life again. You've done remarkable work, he said. We've done it together, Caroline corrected. You gave me the means, but you taught me something too. What's that? She looked at all the faces in the room, people who'd been giving quietly, thinking no one noticed, thinking their small acts didn't matter, that every kindness counts. That when we help each other through the hard days, we're not just changing individual lives. We're changing the world.